Got it. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining, as Todd said, our 7th Tech Talk Tuesday. This one is going to be on new features in 6.x, which is ZPE's major release in the last 4 years, I believe. We went from 4 to 5, and 5 has been our steadfast. And then with 6.0, there was enough new features um, to move it to a 6.0 instead of 5.11 or whatever the case would be. So new train of code, upgrade from 5.0 or all the way back to 4.3, I believe, is a direct upgrade. If it's previous to 4.3, then we would have to do an upgrade to 4. To get to 4.3, and then we can go to 6.0. So it's not a tremendous amount of work to get there. Majority of devices out there are on at least 5.0. So a couple of the new features, GUI-based dynamic routing configuration, movement of Docker configuration files from the default operating system disk to a secondary disk, which is having a secondary disk for virtual machines and Docker configurations is the best practice. So now there's a drop down in the GUI to move those Docker configuration files. Enhanced wireless modem diagnostics and a little bit of advanced or enhanced clustering access. And I'll get into what each of those mean as we go. Little overview. Free range routing is what ZPE uses in Nodegrid OS for dynamic routes, OSPF, BGP, RIP. Not that anybody would use it, but it is what it is. VRRP is also included in there, so now we can get some interface redundancy. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Why we would want to do this, couple of reasons. It removes the need to access the Nodegrid console. It's there, it's still available, not going away, in the second point there, but it gives the administrator the ability to do some scripting a little bit easier. We can import, export the configuration, and we can just paste in our OSPF configuration instead of having to go through the command line. And I'll get into a little bit of that also. The ability to move the Docker configuration files from the primary disk to a secondary disk, which, as I was talking about earlier, is a best practice to have a secondary disk for virtualization. Why? So the bottom line is so that we're not contending with the hard disk that the operating system is on. So the main disk, the 32 gig as a rule, 16 32 gig disk for the operating system can be accessed and used only by the operating system, and the secondary disk can then be used for virtualization and storage for that matter. Enhanced wireless diagnostics. It just bottom line, it makes it easier on the administrator. Instead of having to go into the console, figure out what the command is. The command is there. It's a drop down. We'll get into that in a minute. You can get the configuration. You can download those troubleshooting diagnostics, get them to tech support, go through them on a separate piece of paper or on a separate computer, get them to a coworker or whatever. And then masking sensitive data in the diagnostic data is optional. I know a lot of risk management departments, compliance departments are requiring that before a configuration goes off site. So if it's coming to ZPE for a problem, if it's diagnostic data for a device that a ZPE systems device is hosting, we can get that and mask the sensitive data. So with that, I'll move into the demo, maybe. There we go. So as I was talking about, let's start off with OSPF. In this case, let me exit out of here. So in this case, I was in the free range routing. It's straightforward. in the way pre 6.0 that we would configure OSPF is to go into the free range routing using exec FRR. And now we're in the free range routing configuration. So in this case, if I do a show run, it's just like a Cisco or a Aruba, whatever device, Arista, pretty much the same commands. We can see that this device has free range routing operational. You can see that I have a very simple OSPF configuration. And you can see I have some neighbors, and if I do a show IP route, you can see I have a whole bunch of OSPF routes that I've learned within the within this specific Nodegrid device. If we wanted to see what the routes look like from the GUI, we can go into tracking, we can go to network, then we can go to routing table, and you can see that the gateway is displaying as 129 or 192.168.2.28 in my network. That is my core router, core switch. So you can see this is where I'm getting my OSPF routes from. So to be able to configure, I'm going to go into a different device now. Has no OSPF configuration. From there, we'll go through and configure OSPF via the GUI. The first step that we need to do is go into security and then services. And then we need to go in and enable free range routing, OSPF, V3, RIP, BGP. We can enable them all here. And if we save that, now we can see we have OSPF enabled. So now if we go to network, routing, and then free range routing, you can see that this is the configuration that we saw in our from the command line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my notepad. I have a configuration that I can paste in. Grab that entire thing. Copy that. So one thing to note here, the exclamation points are important. So we want to ensure that we enter a carriage return, and then we can paste in our configuration. So in this case, it goes into the router OSPF configuration, sets a router ID or OSPF router ID, so that can reference, you can reference that in a routing table or whatever. Redistribute kernel is important if you're going to host virtual machines on the device. Instead of entering a network statement for the virtual machines IP addresses or subnets, if it's the Docker /16, or if it's the virtual machines /24, redistribute kernel will redistribute the virtualized routes or the routes from virtualized machines into OSPF. Redistribute connected is interfaces that are connected to the Nodegrid that are not in any of the major network statements. So then if it was, say it was 10.10.10.10 on ETH0, if it was connected, it would redistribute that /24. In this case, I have a couple of networks. I advertise the OSPF router ID into OSPF with just a /32. So it's coming from this device. And then my main network configuration. And from there, if we select save, that is it. It's that simple. Now we can go to tracking. And as we did on the last one, it takes a couple of seconds for routing to converge. And we can go to the console too. And you can see that OSPF has converged, and now we have OSPF routes learned from the network. So that's via the command line. Move this guy out of the way. And if I hit reload here, I'm sure those routes will show up. So Quick configuration, you can do the same thing with BGP. So if we go back in and we go to routing, you can enter on a next line BGP or RIP commands, and then also VRRP or whatever the protocol that's needed can be all done through the GUI. The next one I wanted to talk about was the moving of Docker configuration files. So in this case, what we would do is go into the GUI. I'm going to exit out of here. And then I'm going to go into the shell just to ensure that we have a secondary disk. And then if I do an ls block, be okay, it shows the blocks that are within the just a Linux command, so you can see what disks are available within your device. So SDA is the main primary disk, and SDB, you can see that it's 476.9 gig. So it's 500 gig, and there's a little bit of overhead, but it's SDB1. So what we can do is we can go back to our gate, and then we can go to security and services. And then when we scroll down, we can enable Docker. And a new submenu comes up, Docker directory location, and I can move that to the second disk. So if I hit save, it usually takes to turn on, 15, 20 seconds to rewrite the files and to enable Docker. So that's a quick overview of Docker. And now let's move on to advanced modem diagnostics. So we can go to System, Toolkit, and then Wireless Modem, and we can see general diagnostics. We can run that. And what'll happen is it'll go look at the modem. Signal strength looks okay, but we can see the diagnostics of that device. But we have other commands that we can run by simply hitting the button. So I list modems, and then I can go and do let's see, network service. This one is for basically shows what's going on within the network that's coming in. In this case, it's AT&T. But you can see the commands that you would have to run and then get the output. In this case, I can download all of this output to my local computer, and now I would have that in a text file that I can go in, look at, change, do whatever. One other thing is you can do all available actions. It takes 30 seconds or so, but you can get everything in one text file. Excuse me. So we'll let that complete. And as I said, it takes a minute because it has to run a bunch of commands. But now we have the entire listing of the commands that are predefined in here. We have run, and now we can download that also. So one other quick one that I'll go over is if we go back to Toolkit and we go to diagnostic data, we can see, as I was talking about earlier, we can apply masking to sensitive information. So by default, no matter what, passwords, private keys, and any secrets are, of course, masked within a diagnostics file. The other things that are usernames, IP addresses, as it says on the screen there, all of those things are not masked. So if somebody got a hold of a diagnostics file, a spurious user or whatever, they could very well get a definition or a diagram of what a customer's network looks like and see what IPs go where. In the case of masking, it masks the entire network configuration and system logs, everything. So let's go to back to toolkit. And then one of the other features that was introduced that I don't have anything currently is when you're uploading and downloading files, it gives you a status bar of how far along the file is. That was something that we've been asking for since way back in the 5 train, and we also have that. With 6.0, another feature is that there is a readout on the screen when an upgrade is being completed as to what's happening within the device. It used to be we had the ZPE logo was just sitting there going white and gray, white and gray. In this case now, an upgrade tells you copying the image, loading the image, converting the configuration. So you get much more information, and you know where you're at, instead of guessing, is this upgrade done? Continuing to hit the refresh button to see if it's up, or having to continue with a ping or an ICMP echo in order to see if the device is back up. So with that, Todd, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. Do we have questions?
Yes, absolutely. I had a couple that came across. First one is, what is the ZPE system software firmware release policy?
Good question. That's really a two-part question. The as far as new releases, as far as bug fixes and those kind of things, it's usually on a monthly or month and a half to 2 month progression. That's not a hard and fast rule. It's when the release has been tested by QA, by the technical folks within ZPE, the SEs, some of the other engineers. Once those things are done, then the new features and the new code is released. The other side is for critical vulnerability. So ZPE's stand is medium and low critical vulnerability exploits are fixed on a 30-day. They're fixed within 30 days, I should say. And then if it's a high or extra high, the ZPE standard is 7 days as what's on paper, but usually within 3 days, the highs and very highs are replaced, and a subversion of code is placed out on the web to rectify those critical vulnerabilities. So kind of a long explanation, but
no worries. And it's next question, it's a little bit longer of a question, so bear with me here. When moving the Docker configuration files, if there is an existing Docker configuration set on the default disk, will that configuration be moved if the secondary disk is selected in the Nodegrid GUI?
Yes. So what it basically does is creates the entire Docker directories. And then if there's anything in those directories, it will move those to the proper places within the Docker directories. So if there's images, if there's whatever, it will move all of those files and configuration files for Docker. Yep.
Gotcha. And then the last one, if anyone else has any other questions, please throw them up. But the last question I have is, are there other features that were introduced in Nodegrid OS 6.0?
There are. I wouldn't call them. They are new features. It's things that we've been asking for quite a while, that were in the old software, but maybe fixed or bug fixed is a better way to put it. So one of the big ones is the status bar, as I said earlier, for uploading and downloading of files bigger than a meg. any interface in the IP chains firewall rules is now selectable. It used to be only the main interfaces that were on the node grid. So what that meant was that if I go under connections here, all you would be able to see were the main interfaces, ETH0, SFP0, 2, but these, like a virtual machine bridge I have here for a virtual machine, and the HQ LAN, a subnet of virtual LAN subnet. Those were not in or available to create a rule within the firewall. That's probably one of the bigger ones. And then within the save settings, there is, once you go under system and toolkit, when you do save settings, I don't know if I have on this one. Let's just do Marc. And finish. So now those configuration files are available in File Manager so that you can go in, grab them, look at them. It used to be they were saved on the TPM and you couldn't get to them. You could only go into the command line to extract them. Now we can go in and extract them without having to go to the command line, move them to a file, move them to a USB. We can do everything from File Manager. So yeah, and that's pretty much the majors. There's some security things, working with when a user is logged out of the web UI, their sessions are all cut off. That was something that stuck around. So as I said, it was being done, but it wasn't in 6.0. It was fixed in a way that gets rid of the sessions too, instead of waiting for 2 days for the for Nodegrid to time them out. When their user times out, the session is also deleted. So we see those sessions under admin or under tracking. This is what I'm getting at. So when these sessions time out, they will be deleted, and everything will be, those sockets will be opened up for use again. So that's it.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, we're going to give you guys all back a couple minutes, but thanks, Marc, and thanks everyone for joining today's Tech Talk Tuesday. As I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be doing these on the second Tuesday of each month, and we'll give you guys back a couple minutes into your day. Thank you so much.